Many of you would have different opinions about prayer, right? But there's one thing nobody should ever do. I'm going to lead off by this. Never, ever get angry. Never get angry. If you perceive that somebody's not praying for you, never get angry. That's useless and it's harmful to the individual that gets angry, right? Never do that. Prayer is something that it's a love that one would give towards another by petitioning of the Father. It should never be a mandate. If it's a mandate, it's no good. That's not a petition. That's appeasement. Okay, that's not love either. That's not what that is. Anything like that that's forced is phony. That should come from love's perspective alone. That's it. No other way. Because a long time ago, we had several instances where people would get sick or something would happen or someone would die or pass away. And the people somebody would come in and say, can you pray for me? Right? And then while everybody was still listening to the broadcast and nobody really caught what they were saying, they would get irate. And it happened with, different people would do this because sometimes we just don't know any better, right? It's a bad thing to get upset when somebody does not pray because it does not indicate anything. It doesn't indicate anything if a person did not pray for you. It means that you cannot hear the source of their prayer, all right? But we're going to get into prayer. We have to get into prayer because prayer to me is important. It is a confirmation of one's faith toward the Lord, especially when it's done in private, right? Not publicly, privately. Some of the most powerful prayers in the Bible that I've ever seen, right? They wrote about it, but during the time of the prayer, no one knew about it. No one knew about it during the time of prayer. Those prayers that were powerful, the ones that availed much, were always the prayers that were done in isolation, never the ones in public. Not ever. I can see why, too. I can see why Jesus said exactly what he said. He said that when you pray, don't think you're going to be heard for your many words, right? Going out and like the hypocrites do in front of people. He said, when you pray, go into your secret place. And I can see the reasoning behind that. Sometimes we don't know if prayer is effective or not. You just don't know. I'm going to tell you right now that your prayers are always effective. They're always effective. But when you pray out of greed or something like that, you know better. They're not going to be effective. They're not going to work. It's not going to happen, right? It's like asking the Father for an extra helping of nails. He's not going to give you a helping of nails. Why would he give you an extra helping? But when you're pouring out your heart, your word about a loved one, I'll submit to you right now, before you say a word, before anything ever came out of your mouth, your soul cried out to the Lord prior to you ever thinking about any words to say. God hears the real prayer long before a person ever talks. God will act on one of those real prayers long before a person can ever put the words together. This happened with Daniel. An angel came to Daniel, and the angel said, Daniel, when it was perceived that you were really praying, really setting yourself in position to chasing yourself, before you could ever get any words out of your mouth, when you made that decision to chasing yourself, the answer was being sent. That's before Daniel even talked. He didn't say a word. He didn't write anything. He didn't do anything. Before he ever said a word, the answer was being sent. Why? Because he was truthful in what he was petitioning. And what did he petition for? He was asking the Lord to be merciful unto his people because of their activities, because of how they had drifted away from him, because of their conduct and everything else. Long before Daniel said a word. When in the Bible it says, when he said it in his heart to chasten himself, the answer was being dispatched. The angel was dispatched with the answer. That's like saying long before you prayed, the answer was sent. So that makes the words of the prayer inconsequential, non-incidental to the activities of the Father concerning you. Before you can ever get your paragraphs together, your sentences together, think of what to say. From your heart of hearts, your soul cries out without words that a human can understand, that your body may be able to interpret. Long before you organize your mind, long before you can say a word, your soul has already cried out. Your Father in heaven has already heard it. Isn't that awesome? That is awesome. And the answer, the solution, is sent long before you can ever get anything together. Why? Because it's based off truth, not showmanship. Oh, it's based off truth. It's not based off showmanship. It's not based off how many people heard you. It's not based off if the individual, you said something right here or said something right there. It's not based off your language. If that were the case, none of our prayers would ever get through. Because we speak in a heathen language, a language that was formed of witches. That's what we speak in. How would God ever hear that? Right? It's not your pronunciation. It's all about your heart. It's all about your own personal sincerity. It's about that cry for help. You know what a mama bear does when a baby bear starts crying out for help? That baby bear can play, can do everything. Let it cry out for help and watch what that mama bear does to any predator. It doesn't matter what's around. You better not be around when that baby bear cries for help. Here comes mama. Everything better run. If you're not a tree, you don't be there. Because nothing will stop her from getting to that young cub. Nothing. She will answer that cry. That cub can play. That cub can make all sorts of noises. She won't do a thing. Let it cry one time. Not twice. Once. And watch what happens. That's what your Father does. When that true cry from your soul is released out of truth, it can only be released out of truth. It can't be released out of a lie. It can't be released by way of showmanship. Let it cry for real. Let your cry of the soul be in truth. Let it be formed out of love itself, great concern, great compassion. The Father, He will not fail to hear it. Why? Because it's bound up in what He is, love itself. Because when your soul really cries out, it is never for yourself unless you're asking for forgiveness, unless you truly repent. You don't cry out from the soul for yourself, but you do cry out for others all the time. And most often, you don't know what to say. And sometimes you don't even think you prayed, but you did, because your soul cried out. And nothing's going to stop that pure language of the soul crying out for somebody else, ever. That means when you couldn't think of the words to say when tears fell from your eyes because of your own children, God heard it. He's already at work. See, there are a lot of things He's at work doing. You've long forgotten. Maybe you didn't think you prayed at all, but you did. And it came directly from your spirit to the spirit of spirits. He was working last night. He was at work this morning. You don't think that young man that was in that truck, somebody prayed for that young kid. Somebody cried out for that young kid. The guy that was filming the young kid, it just happened to be on camera. How could that happen? He just happened to be filming at that moment. And even he was saying, "Oh Lord, I hope this small kid's okay." And what happened? It flipped and twirled, went right back on its wheels, and the kid drove off. That wasn't all that happened last night. There were some folks that should have drowned in a car, and the windows broke, and it was a brand new SUV. That was a Lexus SUV that was submerged underwater. So it gets halfway in the water. They can't get out the window. They can't get out of anything because the windows were up. It's all electric. What happens when 3/4 of that window was covered up? All the windows broke. How is that even possible? Those windows don't break. You and I know this. Somebody was speaking. The Lord was overseeing, doing what He does. And if nobody was there, their ending would have been what thus saith the Lord anyway, with or without the prayers of anybody, because there are a lot of people, they don't have family members. They don't have friends. No one knows they're trapped under the house. No one knows what has happened to them. But God shows up anyway. Do you understand? See, sometimes we get high-minded. We act like if we don't pray, somebody's going to die. Wrong. I don't know who put anybody high on the horse. Nobody has to pray. Listen, I'll tell you this. Nobody has to pray for me because Jesus did. And he said he would never leave me nor forsake me. And that goes for you too. So your making it is not hinged on anybody's prayers. It's based on the Father's love for you. You can't outdo him. You cannot outlove him. When you do pray, you complement the love that's already pouring out. When you pray for intercession, God will move upon it, should he find it favorable in his eyes. Oh, you can change. He'll listen to his children. Why do you think Jesus was sent in the flesh to die in the flesh? He had to experience flesh, and to die and to be crucified in the flesh, and to die by that same flesh, so that we would have a route of escape from the sin and the curse we were under. And he was resurrected, wasn't he? He was still in that same body, but that body was glorified. So will ours be, in a different form. You see, he made a way for us to get out of who we were and to be put into who we are going to be. Jesus made that way for us. We, in a similar fashion, do that multiple times throughout our lives for somebody else. And in these times of crisis, do you know what you end up doing? You end up dying to self. So when you're worried, sick, when you're crying, when you're full of fear and everything else, you're dying to self. You're finding out that all of what you thought you could do may not work. You end up calling out on the Lord anyway. And you abandon some of the things that you would have done previously, like a child, maybe solving a mathematical problem. They don't know the steps. And when they find out it does not work, they get highly discouraged. But then guess what they do? They say, please teach me. Please show me the way. That's when we become teachable. If our way worked, we would not seek the Lord anymore. Don't you think? That's just what humanity is. Anytime they believe they can do something, they move away from the Lord. But when they find out they can't do as much as they thought, what do? They abandon their pursuit, their high-mindedness, their pridefulness of what they were in. And they say, you know, Lord, I need you right now. We put all foolishness aside, especially when it comes to those we love, don't we? We start changing. You don't think that's on purpose? That's God getting us to grow through every means necessary. Because of all things on the face of the earth, you are the most important to the Most High. You are. He sent countless prophets to tell us his word. And what do? We didn't hear them. He sent his Son to die for us, to make a way, and sent his apostles to speak to us also. He had a word bound up in a book, and it made it through thousands of years to reach us. We have the Holy Spirit constantly telling us, don't let the book go. He's an amazing Father. Who would pour that much time, persistence, into stubborn children? He would. Who would declare that they would never leave nor forsake you? Who could ever declare such a thing? One who loves you more than you can imagine, that's who. You have to love someone to make that decree. And if you only spoke truth, none of us would ever make that decree to somebody else, unless we love them to the point of death. We could never say, if we spoke only truth, I'm not talking about wishful thinking, only truth, right? We could never say, hey, buddy, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. We couldn't say that in all truth because we don't know what tomorrow holds. Think about your Father in heaven who sent his Son to say that to you. And Jesus said, he said, when I speak, it's not me that's speaking. It's the Father. I speak what the Father says. So God himself said, he'll never leave you nor forsake you. How could he say that? I'll tell you how. Because he meant it. Because he decreed it. Because he purposed it. Because he cannot lie. He has no interest in speaking deceits. For him to speak the truth means he will move time itself, that will never fail. His word it never returns void. Do you understand? He knew what he was saying when he made that decree. And for that decree to stand means he's ready to move everything for you. because he said he would get us back home. It's written in the Bible, he knows how to deliver the righteous. So don't you think, see, we should investigate prayer and some happenings of prayer. Somebody says, why did Jesus keep his scars in his glorified body? Why would you get rid of them? He told us something. Jesus, will he keep those scars forever? No, he will not. But he's coming back again. And they will ask him, who put these holes in your hands? And Jesus will say to them, my friends did this to me. He's going to keep those scars until he comes back again. He will keep those scars until he drinks the new wine with us. He will keep those scars. Why? Because salvation stands. So long as salvation is offered to this earth, he'll keep those scars. He'll keep them. But listen to me. When those scars are gone, it's all finished. It's all done. And that means you have been fully delivered. He's the Lamb right now. If he were not the Lamb, right, we couldn't be forgiven. That's why when he comes back, nobody's going to be forgiven when he comes back. He's been separate this entire time so that countless generations could be redeemed of the spirits he decides to send here. But when he comes back, he's going to be what? King of kings and Lord of lords. He will not be the Lamb. He'll be the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And it's all to secure us. So he bears those marks for our sakes. So that when we sin and when we do foolish things, even for some of the things we can't even think of, those scars and those wounds, they stand right now today. When Satan seeks to accuse you of what you do against the living God, Jesus Christ sits right at the right hand of the Father, standing ready to perpetually be that sacrifice that we need. So Satan can no longer accuse. Satan has no placement in the heavens. He's not in the heavens. Satan is somewhere else. He and his fellows have been put out. And if you look carefully enough, you'll see the fallout from that. If we can get out of denial and out of fantasy, you'll know exactly where Satan is, because he's doing exactly what God said he would do in the earth. And he's pursuing the remnant of the seed of that woman who was to give birth to a man-child, and he was to rule the earth with a rod of iron, but he was called up to heaven. Isn't that awesome? So last night, the storms, they scared people to pieces. Why isn't everybody dead? Why is there no big death toll? Why? Because our Father purposes such things. Have you ever wondered, how can these tornadoes go through all these cities, destroy all that property, right? But then you look at the death toll, and in some cases you don't see a death toll. That's not what you see. They don't even talk about the wounded because they're superficial wounds. There have been occasions, for example, in in Kansas, Nebraska, or places like that, when they were steeped in this witchcraft stuff. Tornadoes came and tore those places to pieces, stopped the prosperity of those who were giving money to these places, right? Just totally stopped it. In some cases, God got people to get up and get out of those areas. But do you ever check to see what happens after the storms leave, what the policies are in those places, the degradation of spiritual things in those places? I remember one time, a mile-wide tornado ripped through several different places. And then the military, some of the forces in the military had an issue in those very areas. But they called people who work on the civilian side. They were connected with the Vatican to take care of a problem because there was a real problem there. The people had no idea that they were being uprooted from where they were and being put in a different location. They had no idea. No idea. The Lord knows what he's doing, and that's why I don't give credit to mankind. The HARP system, we can do a whole thing on the HARP system. We can replicate HARP. You can replicate HARP. All you need is 3 microwaves. You can do the same thing right now. So weather modification, you know what you're about to see what they're not able to do. You're about to see the totality of their advancements. Let me share this with you guys. Just a small thing. When nuclear war begins, and there will be nuclear war. You're going to see who has what. You're going to see that a lot of this talk and hype was talk and hype, and that the weapons they had were somewhat crude, and that some of the stories, see, on occasion, people talk about subjects, and in theory and in books, they will advance the armed services, not knowing that, man, they have experiments, but they didn't manufacture everything. They didn't. They don't have every contingency in mind, and their abilities are not what they used to be. We have a degraded world that's advanced from hidden folks. Might as well call those hidden folks, but they can't escape either. Anyway, we're going to see. Don't worry about those things. Every time we have storms like this, right, it's in a person's mind, well, if I'm in the middle of the storm, it's no big deal, right? And it really isn't. But, people have it in their minds. It's no big deal. God will save me, right? Other people, when they hear something like that, they think it inappropriate. They think it inappropriate because they've been in the middle of those things, and people get frightened, right? People get really scared. Somebody has low volume. It must be on Mixler. Is Mixler too low, guys? Let me turn it up. How about that? Is that better? That was up a notch. Is that good to go? Good to go? Because now I'm whispering. Can you guys hear that? Should be good to go. Mixler shouldn't be redlining. Too bad yet. I don't know about you guys, but I think prayer is awesome. It is. Prayer is awesome. It's awesome to be able to participate in what the Lord's going to do anyway. It's awesome to find out that you and the Lord had the same idea. I think it's awesome. But I'll say it again. If nobody ever prayed for me, the Lord's going to have his way anyway. My life or my death is not contingent upon anybody's prayer. That's based upon Jesus Christ. That's what it's based upon, right? Your life and your death it has nothing to do with somebody's prayer. But when we pray, something happens. Something takes place. If God can do everything, and he can, if he can do it all himself, and he can, right? If he really does not need us, but he loves us, it doesn't matter if we don't pray or pray. That has to be qualified, doesn't it? Because a lot of people think, well, it doesn't matter if you pray or not. Why did Jesus say men ought pray always? Are we actually looking at the word right? Do we actually know what prayer is, or do we just assume we know what it is? I'll tell you something about reading the Bible. The Bible must be understood spiritually. A lot of people have discerned the word logically, not spiritually. And so that word like prayer is lost, or it's never been covered, because people assume they know what it is, and they just go for it. They they make up their own policies or whatever. But let me tell you something. God already said that if you pray and you ask for something and you ask amiss to consume it upon your lust, that prayer is not going to be answered. And the truth be told, a lot of people have unanswered prayers. But why? Because in the Bible, it tells us how to pray. But people are not praying. They're doing something else. But when the trouble comes, that's when people begin to pray. That's when they pray.